Hi guys, Steve the amateur historian here with you, and it's not supposed to rain, but it's looking a little, the weather's looking a little suspicious, which is nice. The closer it more looks like it's gonna rain, the less people are out here trying to get close to me and buddy up to me, and I'm like, I'm trying to vlog, and also COVID, get away from me. So it's May 19th, 2021, and this is a fun video. I get to talk about a funny little story in relation to a major national event that was going on that had massive repercussions for our nation. Really didn't make us look that good as a country, and our president ended up resigning at the end of it. So you probably know what event I'm talking about if you have, you know, even just a novice background in history. I'm talking Watergate. But before we get to that, remember, as always, to like, share, subscribe. Hit up my Patreon if you want to help me out that way, even if it's only $1. Seriously, if I get a bunch of people coming on my Patreon pledging $1, I will be able to do so much more with this channel. The more money I make through this, the less I have to, you know, make money elsewhere. Makes it sound like I'm gonna be walking the streets. I just gotta walk the streets panhandling for money. Anyway, and I'm always posting stuff there for you as an extra thank you and incentive for you helping me. The link to my Patreon is in it. This car sounds like it's about to fall to pieces. Anyway, my Patreon link is in the description of this video, as well as the links to my Instagram and Facebook pages closely related to the content I'm producing for, or I guess on, this channel, Steve the Amateur Historian. That said, let's talk about Watergate. So, Watergate. You know, we all generally know what Watergate was. It was a break-in at the Watergate Hotel that sparked a massive investigation that revealed a lot of crooked stuff that was going on in the White House under the presidency of Richard Milhouse Nixon. Not just what he was doing, but what a lot of his closest confidants were doing. And, you know, the Watergate break-in was, you know, a couple guys broke in and they were trying to get to some documents. And see, the thing was, you know, Richard Nixon, as they described, he was a little bit paranoid. And both he and his cabinet had this very distorted sense of right and wrong. They felt they knew so well what was right and what was best, and if you had to violate the law, if you had to violate people's rights and all that good stuff, it was okay because you were doing it to achieve some greater good. It was some of that ends justifies the means kind of stuff that 70% of the time I feel is nonsense. It's real easy to say the end justifies the means, especially if you do something really bad and you luck into it being something good later on. So, the break-in occurs, the 5 burglars are caught red-handed and arrested, and I think initially a lot of people thought it wasn't really going to go anywhere. It was just this random break-in, it was some radicals or something, but then, you know, as the investigation went on and more details came out and people began to realize that this was actually something that went like way up to the top. And so it became just more and more of a serious, like, national concern. And again, as I said earlier, it unveiled all this other, like, crooked stuff that was going on in the Nixon White House. One of the things it uncovered was the fact that there was an obvious attempt to cover up what had happened, or cover up, you know, how high it went up, and revealing all this other stuff about the Nixon White House. And of course there's the iconic tape recordings from Nixon's office. One of the tapes missing a roughly 17-minute section of information that it was, upon examination, shown that it was erased. It wasn't just, and you know, they tried to claim that his secretary like accidentally erased 17 minutes of the tape, and you know, people still theorize left and right what was on those 17 minutes of tape. And one video I was watching, you know, this is a very interesting element of it, is there was the stuff that was released on tape of what was being discussed in the Nixon White House was so inflammatory that it's like, what was so awful about those 17 minutes that they actually deleted those and then left all this other really inflammatory stuff in? Well, people have theorized a lot of stuff. People have even theorized that maybe there was some discussion about the Kennedy assassination and some details about that you know, the higher-ups didn't want the public knowing about. A lot of theories, and we just don't know for certain, because whoever was on the tape never said what was on there. I mean, why would they? So anyway, I'm talking about Watergate because it gets at the crux of this particular little story I found. So it's May 1973. Watergate has long since happened. They're in the process. They've put a committee together who is kind of conducting an investigation overall into the matter, and they're talking to all these people connected to the White House, and obviously people connected to the Watergate crime. And one of the individuals that was one of the 5 burglars that broke into the hotel that was apprehended was a guy named James W. McCord. And James McCord was a particular issue with this whole thing because he used to work for the CIA. And you know, CIA has a history of doing all sorts of crooked stuff. And you know, the question then becomes, why is a ex-CIA guy mixed up in this burglary? Like, is this really as random as we think it is, or is there something deeper behind it? And of course, we ultimately found out that there was. And yeah, McCord also was one of those guys that he realized the implications later on of his actions, and after a lot of people testified, they were, you know, a bunch of them were lying and committing acts of perjury because they were pressured by the White House to do so, to try to protect themselves. And McCord was one of the guys that did this. So he became kind of aware, like, he's going to get in a lot of trouble for perjury, and maybe he can save himself a little bit if he's kind of the guy that steps forward and rats on everyone. Except in this case, I wouldn't really call it ratting. You know, ratting someone out always has a negative connotation to it, but somebody does something wrong and you report on it, especially if you were directly involved and you know you're still gonna, you know, serve consequences for it, that's, you know, it's all a matter of who you are. If you're the bad guys that are being ratted out, of course you're gonna call that person a rat, but it's like, how about you don't do stupid shit that's gonna get you in trouble? You know? If you're a twisted piece of crap crook, yeah, I'm gonna tell somebody what you did. So he was one of the people that came forward and said, like, you know, we're all committing perjury. We're all lying to you about what this all actually means. And really, again, Watergate was just one element of a lot of other things that ultimately led to Nixon choosing to resign, because he was probably going to be impeached otherwise. And yeah, so I mean, really, Watergate was kind of the catalyst. A lot of people think that the whole thing that led to Nixon's resignation was just the discovery of Watergate and the fact that they tried covering it up. But there was a lot of pieces to this puzzle. So anyway, that's kind of some general background information on Watergate and who James McCord was. That said, there is a cab driver right there in Washington, D.C. where all this stuff's going on. They never give the name of the cab driver, but he's a cabbie in Washington. And I don't think people realize how glued to their radios or TV sets or whatever they had people were when this whole Watergate situation was going down. I mean, everybody was paying attention. They were hanging on the words of every person who stepped forward and testified. I mean, this was major. You know, any crooked things that presidents may have done in the past, they were usually able to kind of conceal it. But this one was out there, and once the momentum started going, the Nixon White House couldn't stop it. So this was revelatory. This was a major, you know, nation-altering thing that was going on. It was going to change our country forever. And so this cab driver, like everyone else, was paying very close attention to what was going on, and he had his radio in his car tuned to, you know, whatever radio station was going to be spending their time talking about the Watergate hearings, you know, playing, you know, live clips, whatever. You know, there's, you know, these big situations like this, you know, they're situations that we need to pay attention to, whether we're interested in politics or not, whether we're, you know, really into this stuff or not, or we'd rather just be watching a movie, sitting on our ass, eating a pizza or something. Like, when major events like this happen, they're important, and people need to pay attention to what is going on, because major changes can happen. Like, this is important. If an event that major is going on and I'm sitting there following it, and someone comes in and is like, hey man, can I turn on, like, this, I don't know, can I like put in a movie or something? I'll be like, no, later bro, like, stuff is happening. You want to like turn your brain on and pay attention? I'm not trying to be like an elitist historian guy, like, I'm a historian so you gotta care, but it's just major events happen and people need to care. And if you don't care, then I don't care about your perspective on those events in the aftermath, when we have to deal with whatever follows that event in the future. I'm not going to care about your perspective if you weren't invested when the major events were going down. Anyway. So this cab driver has this stuff on, and he is going to listen to it, and he doesn't care what his passengers think. This guy was like, if I lose a fare or two today, I mean, whatever, this is important and I'm invested in this. This is major, major stuff. We're gonna maybe lose our president soon, in a way that, you know, where Nixon resigned. You think about the president goes on TV and says, I'm resigning as president, and then gets into a helicopter and gives the peace sign, and then just flew away. So one rider is getting a ride with the cab driver, and this person doesn't mind. They're probably interested too in all this stuff that's going on. And he asks the cabbie, like, do you get any objections from people who get into your cab and you're playing this Watergate stuff? Has anybody kind of come on and complained to you about it? Like, hey, turn some music on. I got a headache. Can you turn the radio off? And the driver actually replies, well, yes, there actually was one particular instance, and I wish we could know exactly who these men were, but the cab driver said earlier that day, 3 men hailed his cab, and he took them to Capitol Hill. He took them right to the epicenter of where all this stuff was going on. And he said that, you know, these men, the way they were dressed up, where I was taking them, he said they looked and they acted like Nixon people. And these guys got into the cab and they're hearing the Watergate stuff playing, and they asked him to turn the radio off. At which time the cabbie turned back and looked at him and said, hey, you know, you don't have to take my cab. I'll drop you off right here and you can get another cab. But as long as you're in here with me, like, I'm keeping this stuff on. I'm not gonna turn it off just because maybe you guys are on the other side. Maybe you're Nixon supporters and you don't want to deal with this. And apparently the men kind of just grinned and bore it. Grinned and bared it. I can't think of a way to say that in past tense. Sounds like you would say grin and bore it, but I don't think that's right either. Anyway, The cab driver was not turning his radio off for anyone, even if they were people that worked on Capitol Hill, people that were directly associated with, you know, potentially the highest parts of our federal government. And I just thought that was a real interesting little story. Not that it in and of itself is really that hilarious or bizarre or strange, but just the fact that you just know with how Watergate gripped everyone's attention, you just know that as this major monumental event is going on, there was all these little events going on, everybody having their perspective, people having random encounters, people probably arguing about it. You know, how great of a president is Nixon? Well, he only did it because he thought it was right. No, he's committed horrible acts, he should be thrown in prison. Whatever perspective you are siding with. And there had to be just all these little baby-sized stories, little vignettes like this of this cab driver taking a couple men right there to Capitol Hill and telling them, hey, you don't like what I listen to? You know, it's like the guy in The Big Lebowski. You don't like what I play? Get your own damn cab. So that was really what grabbed my attention about the story. Not that it was really all that enthralling in and of itself, it's just the major circumstances with which it occurred during. That's what I really loved. This little quirky thing. And that is today's story for May 19th. And this is another one of those days where it was really hard to find a story. And then I stumbled onto that little gem. I was like, all right, that definitely got my attention, and I could talk about Watergate as a lead-in. So it was, the stars finally aligned. So thank you so much for watching today's video. Thank you so much, if you have been, for supporting my channel, for supporting this series, for supporting me. If you want to support me further, well, remember to like, share, subscribe, hit up my Patreon if you want to help me out there. I'm always posting new stuff there for you, including a little like recording podcast pieces, unreleased extra content, some older videos that I haven't reposted. Lots of general little things will pop up there that you can access if you become a patron today. All that said, till next time, this has been Steve, the Amateur Historian, and I'll see you tomorrow. Is that at me? I hope you were honking at me because I wasn't moving fast enough for you. Because that means you're a dick for honking at me, but I also slowed you down.